What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. I'm your host, TJ Zwarich, joined as always by my good buddy, co-host Adam Blevins. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. I'm so sad that this show is already over. It seems like we haven't had, as much time to talk about it as I think we both would have liked, but it seems like it just kind of got kicked off yesterday, and now we're already at the penultimate episode, which is just absolutely wild. Time flies, but I'm super happy to be here with two more Percy Jackson professionals. After two Percy Jackson professionals last week, we're running it back. Two more professionals this week, man. I'm super excited.
We had a late start to the Percy Jackson and the Olympians train, covering Echo, covering What If. If you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you check out my red carpet interviews from Echo with Devery Jacobs and Katarina Ziervogel up wherever you get your podcasts and on the Agents of Fandom YouTube page. But, of course, it is now Percy Jackson time. Last week, we talked about the first half of the season, as well as the sixth episode with Erica Ito of the Seaweed Brain podcast, as well as Emma Doris, our fellow agent. And now this week, we have another fellow agent joining us, huge Percy Jackson fan himself, and doing the recaps up at agentsofandom.com. Brandon Moore, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited about this episode. I can't wait to finally chat with you guys about this show.
And if Walker Scoble isn't Mr. Percy Jackson, if Logan Lerman isn't Mercy Jackson, then it's our guest right here, the host of Riptide Radio, the man you see all over your feeds if you're searching for Percy Jackson doing the best content out there in the industry for PJO. It's Liam Crowley from ComicBook.com. How you doing?
Wow, thank you for that warm introduction, TJ. It's an honor to be here. Like I said, I can't get enough of this series. I love dissecting it with new people, and I feel like we're going to have a very fun conversation, especially this episode in particular, one of my favorites of the entire season.
Before we get into it, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, subscribe to the Agents of Fandom wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you follow us on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else, because we couldn't get the ofs on TikTok and Twitter because people stole it and they're mean. And so help us out, hit the like button, make sure you're subscribed. Before we talk about the episode specifically, I want to dive in with you, Brandon, and with you, Liam, about where this fandom came from for you, because what we talked a little bit about last week is how, like, until you dive into the Percy Jackson fandom, you don't realize how huge and passionate it is. Like, this is Harry Potter level before the book started, before the movies started. Like, there's so many people so excited to get a proper adaptation, and it's finally here. I'll shut my mic off so Shadow shuts the heck up. But Brandon, how did you discover the book series? How long have you been a fan? And what does this mean to you to finally get a proper adaptation?
Oh, man. So I think I discovered the Percy Jackson series, I want to say it was 2007. I was at Borders bookstore. That tells you how long ago this was, that Borders was still around, for like a midnight release party for the final Harry Potter book. And there was a display of I think the first two Percy Jackson books in the store, and the line was sort of weaving in between the tables and stuff. And so I was standing right next to it, and I just picked up a copy. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never heard of Percy Jackson. And I just sort of read the blurb on the back, and it said that it was this like middle grade sort of young adult book series that incorporated Greek myths. And I bought it that day, had no idea that I would connect to the character the way that I do. And once I actually started reading it, and I saw that this is about a young kid who has ADHD and dyslexia. Now, I had been diagnosed with ADHD like back in second grade. And for my entire life, people had always treated me like I was stupid, or like I was a problem, or that something was wrong with me. And Percy was the first character that I ever saw that represented sort of how I felt and how I sort of grew up. And it I had never seen anything like him in any sort of media. And the way that Rick Riordan made Percy's perceived weakness a symptom of his superpower, that he's the child of a powerful god, and that his ADHD is his restlessness for wanting to be in battle, and his dyslexia is because his brain is hardwired to read ancient Greek and not English. it was just really powerful, and it really spoke to me. And I think that he's a hero that so many people, regardless of their age, can identify with. And seeing the character and the series finally get their due among larger general audiences nearly 20 years after the fact is really gratifying. And just to get an adaptation that obviously doesn't completely adhere to the source material, but is faithful enough to it and gets the most important things right, is really great. And I'm very happy that we're finally getting it, because I think there was a time where we thought maybe this wouldn't happen. So yeah.
Liam, what's it been like for you? I remember seeing how excited you were when this got announced. We had already been following each other on Twitter, the excitement, and now you've taken that excitement and channeled it into, man, not just interviews, but you're best buddies with the cast, with the crew, with the authors. Where did it start for you? And then this has got to be a dream come true now that it's all happened.
Oh yeah, well, first off, I love, Brandon, that you were able to recall like the setting of like Borders and waiting in line and all that, because like for me, I just remember around the general time when like I got into the books. It was around like second or third grade. All of them had come out except for The Last Olympian, so we had already had Lightning Thief, Sea of Monsters, Titan's Curse, and Labyrinth, and I was reading them to catch up for when Last Olympian came out, and it was like really gratifying as a kid, because it was like my first like big boy book, like you read your Goosebumps and stuff like that, you read some of your picture books in your early years of elementary school, but then when you're reading like 300 plus pages of lore that is adapting Greek myths and stuff like that, it just makes you feel very smart and stuff like that. And so that kind of just like leveraged into my fandom for entertainment as a whole. I like to tell people that like Percy Jackson was my first franchise. The Marvel movies introduced me to film as a whole, that being the Marvel Cinematic Universe specifically. The CW superhero shows like Arrow and Flash, that's what got me into TV and streaming shows like Lost and Breaking Bad, and finding a passion for televised entertainment. But before anything else, Percy Jackson got me into entertainment, period. Like not just books, not just novels, but just like everything in like the fantastical world. And so I've always been like super grateful for that. And I was always an arm's length away from the books throughout my like childhood, but I really reconnected with them when the series was announced for live action, because I remember, man, like the movies coming out and like having some fond memories of the Lightning Thief. I still think there's some redeemable qualities in the movie, and I will go to bat for it at certain points. I can't say the same for the Sea of Monsters. I remember being so frustrated. It was like the week before my family was about to go to Ireland, which is where half of my family is from, for 3 weeks. And I was a stubborn 13-year-old. I was like, I don't want to leave home. You're taking me away from my friends. And my last memory before leaving home was seeing the Sea of Monsters in theaters. And I was like, everything sucks. The world is falling apart. And then, 7 years later, that announcement came out where Rick said that they were developing Percy Jackson for Disney Plus. This is around a year after the deal with Fox and Disney was solidified. And I just remember just having this like renewed sense of passion. And me and my friends started a virtual book club because it was in the height of COVID and all that. And the book club was dedicated to rereading the original Percy Jackson pentology and then diving into the Heroes of Olympus sequel series. And I just found myself just absolutely in love once again with this lore. And then, yeah, like you said, in terms of just like how it just kind of lined up with where my career was going, that book club was going on when I was in the middle of college, and I was working for The Direct at the time. Shout out everyone over there. I know you guys are very close with our friends at The Direct, and I love them so much for giving me the opportunity to like find my voice and all that. And then when just the time came from graduating, it's funny, one of my friends resent me a text conversation we had back in like when I was making a decision of what I wanted to do after college. And I was talking about how like I really wanted to be the Percy Jackson guy, like the same way that like Brandon Davis is to Marvel, or like Ash Crossan is to Star Wars. Like I wanted like people to identify me as like the go-to Percy Jackson like reporter, so to speak, interviewer, whatever. And I felt like ComicBook was a place that I could make that happen. And it just, over the year before the show had any footage while production was going on, it was just the nonstop of like, oh, the composer Bear McCreary followed Rick on Instagram, and maybe that means he's doing the score, so let's write 400 words about it. Or when I interviewed ILM Vice President Jeanette Lewin, who was talking about this new ILM docuseries on Disney Plus, she had a big foundational piece in getting the volume off the ground. So I was like, let's ask her about how Percy Jackson's using the volume, and just trying any way to gather information and make myself like a reputable source for this series. So by the time it came out and the bigger opportunities came, I would feel like I'm really ready for it. And yeah, man, we were saying right before we recorded, it's bittersweet with the show like wrapping up now, because, I am like a little ready for the workload to slow down a little bit, but at the same time, it's hard to not wake up every day with a smile on my face. And like you said, like, it is living the dream at the end of the day. And I'm very fortunate to get the opportunities I do, and just also have the response from fans, from peers, from friends, from family that are like just genuinely enjoying the auxiliary content. I love that people are enjoying the show, and the fact that like a 1-minute interview clip with an actor can bring a smile to someone's face. That is like the coolest feeling ever. So I definitely am gonna miss it when the show wraps. But the good news is it's a hit, and I would be shocked if we don't get at least a season 2, if not a full 5-season arc.
Well, and the viewership numbers tell the story, right? Like this show is going absolutely crazy. And I told this story last week, but it's not something I fully realized until we got to New York Comic Con, when you and I were hanging out there, and you, myself, Emma, Erica, and some other people we know, they're at the front of the Shadow. My gosh, dude, get out of my way. We're going into the panel, and people are just so excited. They're lined up all across the building. They charge in, they're cheering. We're watching that first 10 minutes of footage, and the crowd reaction is comparable to Avengers Endgame when Cap's catching his hammer. Like, everyone is going nuts. It's just like absolutely crazy stuff. Make sure you check out Riptide Radio live after show right after the finale of ComicBook of Percy Jackson on the Comic Book Nation YouTube page. We will also have co-host Nicole Drum joining us for the finale next week. Haven't told you that yet, Adam, but Nicole is going to be joining us for the finale. Surprise. And you guys have just been doing a great job over there. And let's start talking about episode 7 itself, the penultimate. Episode 6, really started getting to a few more changes from the book series, a few more adaptations, doing things a bit different with the story. Adam, I'll throw it to you first. Your breath has been caught. You're ready to rant now. What did you think about episode 7?
So before I talk about episode 7, I want to say one brief thing before I forget. Brandon, there's one thing that I need from you, and it's a list of the people that were mean to you when you were younger. I need that in writing. I can give you like 24 to 48 hours. But if any of you that were mean to Brandon happen to be listening to the show, just count your days. That's all I'm going to say. No, I'm just kidding. But Percy Jackson, episode 7, I really enjoyed this episode. I don't want to rehash so many of the points that I made last week, but I only have like a couple of really small qualms. But I think what's so special about this show is like, it's so obvious what they're trying to do, and they're doing a great job of it. Whereas we see so often like the things that don't work in these shows are like really glaring. Like when it's like the main thing that this show is trying to do is focus on these 3 kids and their journey, and particularly like Percy's journey. Like this is like a coming of age story, and at every corner they're knocking that out of the park. And sure, there's like other things, like tiny things like visuals and things like that are times I notice and I'm a little annoyed by, but it's like it is so much better to get the things right that they're getting right, and then have like a few of the little slip ups here and there that I've talked about before, than like for it to be the other way around and be like, yeah, the visuals were cool, but man, that story was like absolutely brutal. Because those are the kinds of things that you miss on, and it takes it, like for me, these little changes take it from like a perfect 10 to like a 9.2 or like a 9.3, which is still like a really, really good episode of TV. So I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of the specifics, looking at the rundown. I know we're going to talk about some things later, but overall, just like the rest of the season, I think this was an absolutely awesome episode of TV.
This series is like the polar opposite for me of The Mandalorian season 3, where The Mandalorian season 3 had some wow moments of like, this is really cool. This looked really cool. What they're doing here. And then the story was just like, whereas this series, I think, is like being told so masterfully, where they have a couple things visually where I'm like, You know, I saw what you were saying last week a lot more in this episode of like the lighting. You know, give me a little bit more, like get this a bit more brighter so I can see what's going on a little bit more. But then all the things that, like you said, that need to be done right, that need to be hit, are being hit right out of the park perfectly. The cast is incredible. The story is incredible. The score is incredible. And that's something I've really, really been enjoying so far. Brandon, what did you think about episode 7?
Overall, I thought this episode was really good. I agree with Liam. I think it's one of the strongest episodes of the series so far. I think my favorite is probably still episode 2, just because I have a thing for Camp Half-Blood. But I thought that it was really, I think it was told very well. And I think for me, like there were quite a few deviations from the book. There was a lot of stuff that was not in the book in this episode, but it was handled so well that it could have fit right in the book. And I think that one thing that this show is doing very well is that it's doing a really good job of fleshing out Sally Jackson and who she is. And, you know, because she's present in the books, but she's not like, you know, she's not like this overarching presence throughout the books. Whereas in this show, you really get to see that Percy is who he is, and a lot of the choices that Percy makes is a direct result of his mother's love and his mother sacrificing for him. And so I think that this episode was really powerful. I know that we're going to get more into like the specifics of the episode a bit later on, but like what this episode had my favorite scene in the entire show so far.
The end, I don't know if it's this one specifically, and we'll talk more about this one later, but the restaurant scene at the end of the episode with like Virginia Call as Sally Jackson, my God, she's amazing. Like the work she is doing in the show, it's my favorite part. It's like, I mean, maybe adding to it is I got a baby coming in 2 months, you know, that probably adds to it a little bit, but seeing her as a parent makes me tear up every time. And her monologues, her emotional trauma as she tries to handle these situations, it's been absolutely incredible. Liam, what do you think about episode 7? And like, we got introduced to Hades, who you talked to on Riptide Radio.
Sure did. Yeah, Jay is amazing. He gets this character so well, and I just love that almost every one of the actors who play a Greek god, their story is, my kids are obsessed with the book, and I wanted to be the superhero, like in live action. Adam Copeland, who plays Ares, told that story. Same thing with Toby Stevens, who plays Poseidon, told that story. And then Jay was a little different because he himself was the one reading those books to his kids. He was playing the audiobook before bedtime. And so like he knew this lore in and out. I think I dropped like, he said, I as Hades, he's playing his cards close to his chest. And I was like, well, when you say cards, I think of Mythomagic cards. And he immediately smirked. And I was like, oh, this is a dude that knows like the deep cuts right here. But yeah, as for my enjoyment of this episode, I think I go back and forth between this one and episode 5 as to which is my favorite in the season so far. Episode 5, obviously incredibly personal to me just because of Adam's portrayal of Ares and all that. But like this one had that heartfelt moment of that amazing and original scene with Poseidon and Sally. And we talk about, you know, how it's not a beat by beat retelling of the Lightning Thief on the page. And some of those changes frustrate me a little bit, not enough to like deter my like enjoyment, but some of those changes really enhance the product. And the biggest one of them has been the fact that this is not told through Percy's first person perspective. Mm-hmm. Like he is the main character, but we get scenes with Grover and Ares alone. We get scenes with Annabeth and Hephaestus alone. And right here, we get a flashback that was mostly told through Percy's perspective. He's thinking back to it, but then the last layer of that flashback is something that he was completely unaware of. And that moment, man, I teared up. Like I think I actually shed a tear the first time I watched, and then the second time I watched Inside Baseball as to how I like dissect these episodes. The first watch is always just for me as a fan. I never want to lose that. I always want to keep that pure. Work is not even in my mind. The second watch is getting the notes app out, you know, taking notes, what I liked, what I didn't like, what we can analyze for Riptide Radio. And so the second watch is not supposed to be emotional. The second watch is supposed to be completely analytical, in the zone, taking it in like a commentator. And I found myself like the Sally and Poseidon scene happening and just being like, all right, like pause, let's think about it. Like, all right, we'll get back to it. And it's just like, that's the magic of good screenwriting, one, but good execution too. Like what Toby and Virginia were able to do with that scene with such minimal dialogue. They're not going on and on with monologues back and forth. I think Poseidon has maybe 50 total words, maybe 5 sentences, but each word he says has weight. The idea of like what's most painful about it all is you don't have anyone to tell, you don't have anyone to talk to, and I will listen right now. And that's all he can offer because he's a god. He's got other responsibilities and he can't interfere because they know what happens when the gods interfere. We got a little hint of that in the previous episode. So there's so much to unpack with this episode, and all of it, in my opinion, is positive. Like I can't think of a single choice that was made that I was like, I don't know about that. I found myself completely enthralled with the direction they took this, and it laid a foundation for an entire corner of this Percy Jackson universe that I'm dying to explore more. The underworld as a whole could be its own show, could be its own season. If we eventually get to House of Hades in the Heroes of Olympus books, it would be its own season. But yeah, there's a lot to love, and I know we'll talk about the specifics. So yeah, I'm rambling at this point. I'm just overjoyed.
And just like one more person that was absolutely impeccable in that last scene, but again, like we'll touch on it more in depth, but I just don't want to forget about it, is young Azriel Dahlman, who just like saying to his mom, like, I would never do this to you. Like, why are you trying to get rid of me? There's no way he could understand. His poor little brain, he's just a little baby. And it's just so heartbreaking because she can't tell him the truth. Truly a wonderful episode of television. Only things I could pick apart were, give me a little bit more, give me a few more minutes, let's expand on a couple of these things, and let's make it a little bit brighter so we can, our guys with bad eyes like Adam can see it a little bit better. Adam, what did you think of Hades specifically? They, like, so much of this season is building towards when we get to the underworld, and they kind of handle it in a fun way with a, no, I'm not the person you actually think I am at all. Obviously, with knowing book lore and things like that, there's certain of these twists that aren't as impactful for if you don't know what's coming. But what did you think of the Hades twists and that portrayal of him in the underworld?
I mean, Hades was great. Like, all the adults in this show are great, and it kind of, that ties back to one of the points I made last week, where it's like, when I'm critiquing the performances, particularly of like the kids, I only feel like I have to do that because all of the adults are so good in this show. Like, every single one of there's not a single, they nailed every casting, and every single person they cast just completely bought into this role in like an amazing way. According to like what you said, Liam, with having everybody like have that personal connection, that I had no idea about that until now, but it makes so much sense because they are all clearly so invested. But like, I don't know, Hades was great. I do have to, I got to give a little bit of what bothered me for the underworld in particular, because like when I was watching it, particularly the first, until they got out of where like the trees were at and stuff, when they got to like the castle, I thought everything was like, once they got to the I was all the way in. Like that stuff was great. But like when we first get there, Cerberus looked great, but I was sitting there wondering, I'm like, I know like this show had some budget stuff that didn't allow them to make things look, as I'm sure everybody that was working on it probably wanted it to look like as good as they wanted to look. But I was like, I feel like they spent like 90% of the budget on this episode, like making Cerberus look awesome, because he looked great. Like, it was like impeccable. And then some of the rest of it, when they were like walking around, I was like, it's like, it was giving me like the Thor.
It was just gray fog.
Right, where I'm like, oh, and the thing that I kept thinking about, it reminded me of The Mandalorian season 2, The Jedi, the episode where Ahsoka comes in. It felt like they just reused the exact same planet that Ahsoka was on for like the underworld, because it was just like this gray stuff. But again, that's one of those things that like I'm noticing as I'm watching, but it's not like, oh my God, this episode stunk because of that. But it was just like, I don't know, that was just a small thing. But I don't know, you know me, like I'm branded the biggest volume hater on the planet. So like anytime I get the chance like this to critique it, I've got to take it. But I mean, overall, like that's one of those things that when you get to Hades' performance, like in particular his talk with Percy, it's just so easy to forget about all those qualms, because like them going back and forth it was great.
I want to say real quick, I'm reading this, like, I love reading like self-help books, and I'm reading this book right now called Think Again. And I bring this up just because I always read it in the sauna after a workout. It's like good for mental clarity. And it's about like rewiring your mind and like the value of like constructive criticism and stuff like that. And I literally just read a page that was like, people who start criticism by saying, I'm only telling you this because I care and I want you to get better, they're more like receptive to it. So like, I love that you're like tiptoeing, like the show is great. However, I have some criticisms, like lay it on. Like it's because you care. It's because we care. Like I know, like for myself, for Brandon, for like so many people who like love this show, it feels weird to like criticize. But at the end of the day, that's what being a fan is. Like when the Patriots this year go like 3-13, I'm not like, well, we had 3 good wins. No, we sucked and we have to get better. And like this is a show that is probably, if we're gonna make that NFL comparison, probably like 14-2, riding high into the playoffs. But still, there are things you can always improve, especially if we want this to last for 5 seasons. So I appreciate the criticism. We don't got to tiptoe here, and I think all your CGI criticisms are so valid, because at the end of the day, Disney Plus is still approaching these 6 to 8 episode shows with a budget like a feature film, and it's like $150 million for 2 hours of content is a lot easier to distribute than $150 million for 8 hours of content. And they do end up having to cut a lot of corners, and the volume, I think, is a necessary evil at the end of the day. It's not going to look perfect, but it's going to look a lot better than just using a bunch of green screens. So I think everything you said is completely warranted. And I mean, the numbers don't lie. Like Bob Iger, let's double the budget next season. Come on.
I think that's exactly it too, though, right? This is probably going to be the worst season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. As crazy as that says to sound, yeah, but like even maybe in general, because like as these young great actors all get better at acting and all grow with time, and their chemistry, which is already impeccable, gets better. This great season might end up being the worst one as their budget goes up, as their chemistry improves somehow upon how great it already is. So that's kind of an interesting concept to think about, you know, like it's this is the Green Bay Packers right now. They're the youngest team in the history of the NFL to make the playoffs, and they look good in their first playoff game. They're probably only going to be getting better. Brandon, what did you think about the underworld, Hades, Cerberus? I love the whole concept of taking down the big 3-headed dog with some scritches.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I believe, TJ, you found at the panel, I think one of the things that Dan Henna, the production designer, said is that he was going to make the underworld look a little bit different than what I think most people expect it to. And so I mentioned it in my recap, and I know Liam and Nicole talked about it on Riptide Radio last night. But in most interpretations of the underworld, or hell in popular media, you have these like really scary, like fiery pits and landscapes, and you know, it's just fire and orange and red and all of that. But here, the underworld is just drab and shadowy and completely just without color. And I really like that choice. I think it makes it stand out. It's this sort of wasteland that links all of the other places that dead people wind up, whether it's Elysium or the fields of Asphodel. I think is really smart design. I love what he did. And I like that Hades Palace is like an inverted version of Olympus. It's really cool.
That was really cool.
Yeah, and I really like that we're gonna finally see Olympus next week. I can't wait. But Hades in particular, I think Hades is such an interesting character. I went back and I reread his scenes in The Lightning Thief earlier today. And he comes across a lot more sinister and evil in the book, but in the show, Jay Duplass played him as more friendly and a bit more congenial. You can tell that he still has his own agenda, of course, but I'm really looking forward to seeing more of him in future seasons, especially this portrayal. And as far as criticisms, definitely I think that this episode was a bit dark in some places, where it was like, okay, what exactly is going on here? What are they doing? But one of the things that I want to talk about is one thing that you guys talked about is the the budget and the budget cuts. We know that I think episode 2 they cut Argus because they just they weren't able to like do that budget wise. And there's also another moment that I believe would have been in episode 2 that they didn't do. And Liam, I'm sure you can talk to this. The Hellhound in the book, when the Hellhound comes, and that of course is not in the movie, or in the TV show, excuse me. But and so I would imagine that was probably cut due to budget reasons. And there's a lot of stuff that they did, like you guys mentioned, there's lots of fog in this episode, and that's obviously to obscure the fact that maybe there's some stuff that they couldn't do. But overall, I'm really digging what they're doing. I'm liking the look of things overall, and I think that if this show winds up getting a second season, which I believe it will, hopefully their budget will be maybe twice the size that it currently is, and hopefully they'll be able to put a lot more money into these visuals. As a matter of fact, I mean, because there's some stuff in Sea of Monsters that I'm like, yeah, they're gonna have to spend a good amount of money on some stuff if they want to get that right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do have 2 questions for you, Liam, and they have nothing to do with the other. They're completely separate, but I forgot before last time when we were talking about Adam Copeland, so I want to bring it back up now, because obviously you are more qualified as a wrestling expert and a Percy Jackson expert to give Adam Copeland thoughts than anybody else maybe in the world. And so, as also a Marvel fan, Brandon, if you can remember who this was, please give them credit, because I truly don't remember, but this is like the second or third time I brought this up on the podcast. Stephen Yeun has reportedly dropped out of the role, of Sentry. What do you think about Adam Copeland as Sentry in the MCU? Because that, like, if you're going like OG classic style Sentry, I think he'd be perfect.
Yeah, I've never even pondered that pairing before, but now since you mention it, I think that there is a way it could work, especially if you want to go for a more like sinister side of Sentry, because I don't think the plan was to make Sentry like a one-note protagonist or antagonist when Yeun was attached, but I had a very different vision in my head of how Stephen Yeun would approach that character. But yeah, man, Adam Copeland is an actor, wrestler, presence, just waiting for a superhero role. I would argue Ares is a superhero role, DC Comics. But like there are definitely roles within Marvel and DC that he could sink his teeth into, and he's winding down with wrestling too. He'll probably be done full time in like a year or two. He's got a fascinating story for anyone who isn't a wrestling fan. This dude was forced to retire in 2011 because of a series of neck injuries, and over the course of 9 years, he healed up, got to a place that he didn't think would ever be physically possible, and is now wrestling again better than he's ever looked. And that amount of grit and determination, you apply that to a Marvel role, a DC role, what we're seeing right now with Ares, it's very clear that he's very grateful for this new lease on life he has with just being able to entertain, and he doesn't take a second for granted. So that's a valuable asset to have if you're Kevin Feige or if you're James Gunn.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think he's definitely looking to me like the next line of Dave Bautista, John Cena, people who come in not just like, hey, I can do one thing, but there's actually some depth there too, and they can do a really great job as an actor. If you have any additional thoughts on the Underworld, please feel free to give them. But this is kind of the episode where a lot of there's 4 pearls instead of 3. The solstice has passed. This really played out in this episode and got like revealed. What were your thoughts of the changes?
It's funny because I see the discourse happen, and I sat down. I watched 5 through 7. We got the screeners in batches. We got the first 4 episodes in December, and then we got 5 through 8 in January. And so I watched 5 through 7 consecutively, and everyone's like freaking out about the pearls. And in my head, I'm like, I cannot even respond to this because I can't tell people it's not going to be okay, and I can't tell people it's going to be okay. So I'm just going to stand back and like, I understand why people were freaking out a little bit. I was more shocked at the solstices past. I was like, whoa, that's a significant change. And but at the end of the day, knowing that it has Rick's approval, and if anything, it might be Rick's idea. It might not even be something that John and Dan are pitching to him and then he signs off on. Like, this book came out in 2005. like to have 20 years to sit on something. Like, we all create content. I know that there's so many interviews that we post or articles that we write that we're like, ah, man, I should have used this word here. I should have changed up this sentence here. And so it's like, even for a published book, even for 373 pages of the Lightning Thief, I know he will go back and look 20 years later and be like, what if we did this here? And like, just the way entertainment changes, and just the way that it's TV. What works on the page doesn't necessarily work on screen, and what works on screen doesn't necessarily work on the page. We will never know what it's like to go in the opposite direction with the Pearls. They went way too in a different direction with the Pearls in the Lightning Thief movie. So I think we got like a happy medium with what went down in this. And yeah, in terms of just additional Underworld thoughts, I dig the design, and I thought, especially the platform that brought them up to Hades' throne room, and the way that Hades greets them, and the painting that is in like Hades' living room and all that, and the thrones, and you see a second throne, which we presume is for Persephone. There's so much to dissect here, and I am just like, the same way I felt about Madripoor in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the location that I'm like itching to get back to, and I don't think we would get to it in Sea of Monsters unless there's an original scene. But whenever that time comes that we do go back to the Underworld, I think it's going to look pretty cool.
Well, if the MCU is any indication, the next couple seasons of Percy Jackson will just give us mentions of the Underworld, but we're not going to be going back there. Adam, I want to dive more into the Sally Jackson, the Poseidon, and the young Percy of it all, because hit me, Adam. Hit me, Brandon.
I just remembered. So and I don't believe that this is in the book. It's been a minute since I've read the book, but the moment in the fields of Asphodel where Annabeth starts sprouting roots, and she and she's rooted to the spot because obviously she has some sort of regret in her life. I don't believe that's in the books, but it was a very interesting moment that I just didn't want to forget because I'm wondering, like, what is her regret? I know you guys talked about that a bit on Riptide Radio yesterday. But yeah, I'm wondering, like, is it something to do with Thalia? Is it something to do with her father and the way that whole relationship blew up? Like, I'm very curious as to what they're cooking.
Yeah, to spring off that, I make so many comparisons with just like other entertainment mediums that are like mean something to me. They're not necessarily related, and I think to the debate about why Steve was unworthy to lift Mjolnir in Age of Ultron, but he was worthy in Endgame. And the fan headcanon is that in Civil War, he was confronted with the whole idea of like, you messed up in your life by not telling Tony about Bucky killing your parents, and until you make peace with that, you are still not worthy. And that goes to this idea that like maybe he was worthy before because he was able to like lift it slightly, but like, and then everyone was like, oh, he just doesn't want to embarrass Thor, so he's not going to lift it all the way. And then when you have this new headcanon about like, well, why couldn't he lift it all the way? But then we have this whole thing with regret, with not telling Tony. To me, regret as an idea, we only feel regret when we realize what we did is wrong. You can do something in the moment 5-10 years ago and never think about it, and then all of a sudden it gets resurfaced and you have a new perspective on it and you feel regret, and then that is when the consequence of regret starts to root you into place, and you can't move forward until you make peace with it. So with Annabeth, I don't think she gets rooted into the fields of Asphodel unless she has that conversation with Hephaestus and her eyes are open to the problems with the Olympian gods and the problems with blind worshiping Athena, and how Percy is maybe the best of us, and he is showing her a new side of what it means to be a demigod and not just have to chase Kleos and glory and power and all that. Like, there is a happy medium in between that idea of glory or nothing. And the fact that she is understanding that and embracing that, and it's giving possibly her a consequence in that moment of rooting her into the ground. To me, that is a thread we're going to pull on at some point later, especially in Sea of Monsters with everything that goes on with the sirens and trying to get that knowledge and all that. Anyone who's read the books knows what I'm talking about. There's a lot of different threads as to why Annabeth is being rooted in the fields of Asphodel, but whatever it is, I think it is a regret that is only cinched in now because of her relationship with Percy.
That's a really great point. I love that.
Incredible, absolutely incredible analysis. This is why we bring you guys on. This is why you're here, because I'll do that for the MCU. I'll do that for Star Wars. I don't have that same background knowledge though, and so I absolutely love that breakdown. And I'm actually going to pivot my next question here to kind of go based off of some of the things you were saying there, and I'll start with Adam, and we'll kind of go in the same order here, Brandon, then Liam. What are your thoughts on throughout this first season the Percabeth of it all? Not even necessarily just their romantic relationship, but how their connection has grown throughout the first season. That's like, I think that's like the actors, the chemistry, the writing, it's all fantastic. That is another one of those things that I could have used maybe a little bit more of, though, is if not more episodes, more time on the episodes to just explore hanging out, to just explore being with each other, interacting with it, having a conversation while they walk. Go Lord of the Rings with it. You know, there's nothing going on. They're just walking, but there's very important conversations happening. And because like Percy, Grover, and Annabeth, I feel like I could just use an extra episode of each of them just like doing their own thing and learning about them and just getting to see them exist and be. But what have you thought, Adam, about the pace of how that relationship is developed, and then kind of where we're at now from the beginning of, nah, we're not friends, to, you know, we will kill ourselves for each other?
Well, like pacing wise, I think they've executed their relationship really well. And I mean, coming from where we've seen, like where we saw them in like episode 2 to where we are now, I mean, that's like been really, really beautiful growth. But I'm reminded of what Erica said last week. She was like, what we're getting so much of more this season is like kind of planting seeds instead of like those scenes that you're talking about. We're not getting 10, 15 extra minutes each episode of like characters developing relationship, but we're getting like the seeds planted. Like we're going to get these kinds of things where they have a 10, 15, 20-minute walk in an episode in season 2 or 3, and they call back to something that happened in season 1. It's kind of how I'm interpreting it. But even what we've gotten so far of all of them, like I feel like everybody, particularly amongst the 3, which like we were talking about earlier, is the most important thing, is to get these 3 right. They have all had their moments like with each other and as like a group together. They've pulled off that dynamic like beautifully, which is, as we've seen many times, is not an easy thing to do when you've got, especially like new characters, like 3 complete. I mean, I know like most people a lot of people are familiar with the book, so they know a little bit about the characters, but like, or everything about the characters in that case. But for like the people that haven't read the books and know nothing about these characters, they've been developed like absolutely beautifully. There could be no complaint about like, well, I don't know anything about Annabeth, or like, why is Grover doing anything? Like they've covered all their bases with that kind of stuff. And although like I'm with you, because I'm always the kind of person that I'm like, give me 15 or 20 minutes of them just sitting around a campfire talking, like, because those are my scenes right there. I love analyzing the conversations and just spending time with the characters, because that's why we watch these things, for the characters. So while I'm with you that like that kind of stuff would be nice, I'm willing to be patient, because they feel like they're showing us that we're going to get that in the future by like the seeds that they're planting now. I don't know. I feel like overall with their relationship, they've done a really good job with it.
That's a great point. Straight down to the hearing Nico yell, you know, shout out to Liam for fully confirming that and breaking that as an exclusive. People theorized, but Liam, you got the confirmation. And like, those are the types of seeds that like the MCU does in retrospect. You know, they'll do like a great writer will be writing something and they'll go, hey, 8 years ago, remember when we said this? Let's elaborate on that. They're doing that on purpose, because the MCU, it's an accident. When people are doing it at the time, nobody realizes what they're doing until somebody goes back and says, hey, I'm going to add to that. But they're doing this one on purpose. And I do agree. They're planting those seeds so we can look back in future seasons and be like, oh, that was right there. That's so cool. Brandon, what have you thought about the pacing of their relationship?
So overall, talking about pacing, I've had issues with just the episodes not being, you know, like longer. You know, I've wanted them to be, you know, because most of the episodes have been like somewhat, you know, like 30, 35 minutes, something like that. And so I've wanted more of that. But I think that the Annabeth and Percy relationship, I feel like that they've done justice with that. And I feel like they know that they have to get that right. And I think they've done a really good job of sort of, you know, starting them off where Annabeth is just sort of watching him and a little annoyed by him, and then they slowly like grow this relationship over time. And so I've had no issues with that. You know, and obviously we're gonna see their their relationship deepen even more over the course of the next several seasons. And I'm really happy that they're planting a lot of seeds now, as Adam was saying, that they can go back to later and maybe elaborate on even more.
This group really does give me the vibe that like later on, I mean, obviously so many of the lines come from a book, so there's not a whole lot that will be changed in certain situations, but you know, we've been comparing it to the MCU so often, and you know how like towards the end of Robert Downey Jr.'s tenure in the MCU, they don't give him a script, they give him situations, and they say, hey, this is what's going to be talked about, go be your character. And when I got a chance to go and talk to in person, do those interviews with Walker, with Leah, with Aryan, that's the one thing I noticed is that like these kids are their characters. These like they're such like the casting is so wildly perfect, and in addition to that, they seem to really be the three best friends off screen as well. Liam, you'll probably be able to speak to that beforehand, but what have you thought about how their relationship has progressed on screen, and how do you think their relationship off screen has kind of melded and translated onto the screen?
Oh yeah, it's been a great slow burn, and it's funny because like you guys mentioned the wanting those like campfire conversations. It's like we got that at Waterland. Like it's easy to forget because
give me more.
I know, but it's easy to forget because this is a week-to-week show and we're not like sitting down and binging it. That I feel like a lot of those criticisms, I try to tell people, I'm like it was there. You just like, of course, we're on to the next one and we like dissect each episode like it's its own movie, which is great, and I love that we're doing that. But like anyone, I challenge a lot of people who criticize the Percy Beth relationship to go back and see the foundations, because like you were saying, they're planting seeds that some might not be addressed until future seasons, but some have already been addressed. And if you just go back and watch, you'll notice. And that's at the end of the day too, like it's easy to forget, especially for new viewers who aren't familiar with the books, that this is a long game. The entire series is a long game. They should not get to a place of romance by the end of season 1. They shouldn't even be hinting at that. Like that doesn't really blossom until like a season 3, until like a Titan's Curse. Like there are more, fight or flight elements that reveal feelings in Sea of Monsters, but like there are checkpoints to reach, and I feel like we've reached those checkpoints, and we can save the game and resume later. Like I'm very happy with the pacing of everything with those two characters. And yeah, you were saying the whole idea of like them being friends offset and it translating. It really is true. Every young actor in the show that I've spoken to, Charlie Bushnell, who plays Luke, and Dior Goodjohn, who plays Clarice, as well, they all echoed the same sentiment of like young Hollywood. There's just something about it where it's like you're all in this together and you're put on this set, and oftentimes, especially for Percy, 8 months of filming, that's a school year, and you make friends at school. You have people at school within your like circles and cliques that are going through the same things you're going through, same clubs, same interests, stuff like that. And for a lot of these kids being put into this situation, obviously they did chemistry tests beforehand, but like they almost have no choice but to click, because like these are like your new coworkers, friends, classmates every single day. But it is very fortunate that they did in fact form a genuine bond. Like it's very clear to me, Walker and Aryan are like really good friends. I've seen how they like interact during interviews and in person at like the like after party for the premiere. It's just very cool to like see their dynamic. Same thing with Leah and Walker, and same thing with Leah and Aryan, which is kind of funny. A lot of people have said we need to have some one-on-one time with Grover and Annabeth, and I'm like, if and when it happens, it's gonna be great, because they all have their own trio dynamic, but they also have their own individual dynamics, and it very clearly translates on screen.
And it's, to be clear, like with the wanting more, both with runtime and with like interactions, the campfire conversations, what it very much feels like to me is like, damn, that ice cream I just finished was really good. Now I don't need more ice cream, but damn it, do I ever want more? Like I could really use that second ice cream cone. It's not necessary, but for my to fill like my gluttonous needs, that's where it's there.
Sorry, one of my favorite moments in the series so far was the scene on the train at the beginning of episode 4 when Annabeth and Percy are talking, and she's telling him about how she was a gift from Athena to her father. And again, I'm not sure if that's in the book. I know that we like touch on that a bit later in the series. I don't remember if it's in the actual Lightning Thief book, but I thought that moment was a great moment that showed that that Annabeth was starting to at least trust Percy and starting to talk to him a bit more.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think in terms of like to add to what Liam said too, in terms of the pacing, and there should not be romantic moments from the rest of them yet in terms of like the story and canon. Well, it's very easy to forget this when you're watching Logan Lerman and freaking Alexandro Daddario, but you don't need any romantic moments yet. They're 12 years old. Give them time. Let them develop into adults a little bit here. When you're 12 years old, you're not even thinking about that stuff yet. It's you don't even understand if you have what those feelings. You don't understand what they are, and I think they're doing a really, really good job of portraying that. I want to dive into that last scene of in the diner with Poseidon, with Sally, with a young Percy, because like I know this type of show, especially with it being more of like a younger audience show, very targeted to a younger audience, this type of show doesn't get recognized, for big awards for certain things. That it's much more likely to get a Teen Choice Award than an Emmy just due to the genre, right? But my God, Sally Jackson supporting actor Emmy, like because like for Virginia Coe, because like it's impeccable how she just switches from I'm a soft mom just trying to support my son, I'm trying to be there, I'm very mild mannered, I'm just here to protect him, to I'm about to break because I have nothing left, I have no other ideas, I hate seeing my son this sad, and there's nothing I can do. The Sally Jackson performance to me was just like not just a standout of the episode, Adam, but a standout of the series.
Yeah, I mean, I think she probably has been, given she's had a little more screen time, it's kind of hard to compare the adults, like one adult to another, just because we've kind of had more of like a God of the Week type thing, which is how the story's written, given with like the chapters and the journey they're going on. So like, that's not a problem at all, but it's like hard to compare just because she's had like a few small roles, but we haven't seen her and many things. But like overall, I think she's been the best. The biggest indictment you can pay or that you can give any kind of like show or movie is when you're watching two people, like two characters in a scene, and you kind of get taken out of it and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, these are just two actors like talking to each other on camera. That's like the biggest indictment you can give anything. And in this scene, like going all the way back to the start of her conversation in the car with Percy to then her conversation with Poseidon, like sitting at the bar, it's almost like you're just transported to like being there in the car and then in the bar. That was unintentional rhyming right there, but like right there, like watching those things happen, and you're like, no, like this is not two actors talking to each other. This is like a woman talking to her son, and this is like a woman talking to like Percy's father. Like that's the best compliment that you can give like any kind of performer when you're just like completely entrenched in what they're doing. And that's how I felt. It's almost like then when the scene ends, you're like, whoa, like you had to take off like VR goggles or something because it was just so immersive. And she's been doing that with every single one of her scenes going back to like the first episode. That's why the first episode is one of my favorite, because I feel like that's where we got the most like Sally Jackson. And then other than like, or since then, it's kind of just been like little sprinkles here and there, which is fine. Like that's kind of how it serves the story. And like you said, Brandon, too, that's more than we get in the book. So they've done a good job. I mean, they knew that her, like, with her, what her performance was going to be. So they did a good job, like giving her more than we probably would have gotten if they just kept it like a 1-for-1 retelling. But I mean, we can't say enough good words about what she's doing, because overall she's just been incredible. And this latest scene, I don't know what her role is going to be like in the finale, but just given that, what we kind of know, I don't want to, I just kind of try to walk back what I was getting ready to say, because I don't want to spoil anything for people that haven't read the books and just give something away. But like, I don't know if we get whatever else we get from her in the finale, like flashback or anything, I think she's going to really deliver like something that probably even outdoes what she did here. I'm super excited. She's been great.
Here's my
Oh, Robot TJ. Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, you go.
So Virginia Cole has been my favorite thing about this entire season. Like even in, I feel like they've changed the way that they portray Sally Jackson just a little bit. In the book, she's a bit more submissive, especially in dealing with Gabe. And in the first episode, she stands up to him, and he's yelling at her and she's yelling right back at him. She's giving it right back to him. And I really love that they made that change with her. Gave her a bit more a bit more fight, a bit more agency. And as much as I love the golden trio of Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, she to me was the strongest part of this episode. I feel like she and Toby Stevens put on an acting tour de force. And as you guys pointed out on Riptide Radio last night, they never actually looked at one another, but you could feel this history between them, this implied history that you always talk about. You can feel that they've had this loving but tense past, and that that this is a last resort for Sally. She's tried everything else. She's gone to every length that she can to protect her son, and so far nothing is working. And so she's throwing up this Hail Mary by contacting Poseidon and considering doing something for her son that she doesn't really want to do. She doesn't want to send him to camp because she knows what that will entail. She knows that he'll then start getting mixed up with the gods, and she doesn't want that because of that family history, which of course we got more of in I think it was episode 5, right? That we got the Hephaestus of it all. And I love that, like, even though Toby Stevens has this gravitas to him, as one of the 3 main gods should, he's still very much like a father who we can tell he wants to do the best for his son, but he can't directly get involved. And it was such a nice change up from the way he was written in the book. In the book, he comes across as sort of this absent, deadbeat dad who like just really wasn't there ever. And to me, it's such a testament to the writing on this show that the best scene in the entire series, in my opinion, so far, is one that was not in the book. It's a brand new original scene, and I think that they both knocked it out of the park. But Virginia Cole in particular, like I'm like, just give her all of the awards, because she's been she's had limited screen time, as you were saying, Adam. She's had limited screen time throughout the entire series, but she's made every single one of her scenes count. Every single one of them has been beautiful and powerful and impactful, and made me like it just made me feel, it just hit me right in the feels. And I love that about her. I wasn't familiar with her before this, but now I actually want to go back and like find more stuff that she's been in and watch it, because she's that good.
Test. How do I sound? We're back. Are we back?
You sound amazing.
We're so back.
Hey, good. We're so back. I feel like they really took the energy the book had into proving how shitty Gabe was, and instead of using that in the series, they've just translated into that, using that energy to prove how great Sally Jackson is. That's kind of how I'm viewing that one. And I also think there's a really cool parenting kind of theme there, with obviously, Sally and Poseidon not wanting Percy to get caught up with the gods yet, he like just knowing that he's better than the way that they are acting. I feel like there's a really interesting parenting theme there with, obviously everybody's child's not going to be a demigod, and you're not worried about getting them caught up with the gods of Olympus. But so many parents want to control their children and make sure that nothing bad ever happens to them, that they never, ever hurt. But they're going to. It's going to happen, whether it's at school, whether it's with their friends, at sports, at dance, at whatever, and music, whatever it is they do. It's going to happen. And that hurt is also going to teach them lessons. It's also going to be how they learn. It's also going to be how they grow. And I think it's just like, there's something there with, it comes to a point that I can't stop every bad thing from happening to you. You're ready now. And it's up to you. I'll always be there to support you, but it's up to you to make these choices and to live with the consequences of those choices. Liam, have you got a chance to talk to Virginia Cole about Sally Jackson, and what did you think about this whole final scene with her?
I did, and I was reaching to grab my copy of The Lightning Thief, and this isn't just any copy. This is the copy my mom used to teach. She's a middle school teacher, and it became like required reading in her curriculum. They like have like the Boston School stamp on the inside, and it is probably one of my most like valued interview clips ever. We spoke on the red carpet, and I took the book out and I showed it to her, and I was like, Sally and Percy's relationship is like to a T how me and my mom are growing up, even now, and just like the amount of sacrifices she's made for me, the amount of times I've pushed back and I look back in hindsight and realize I was just being a stubborn kid, not unlike Azrael when he's young Percy locking the car door and thinking that, you know, being thrown away, when in reality it's just being thrown to my own devices so I can learn and grow and all that. We shared a very awesome moment on the carpet, and it wasn't really like a question. It was just like sharing our mutual love for this character. It was really special. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, it's on my Instagram. You might have to scroll back a little bit, but it's there, and I treasure it a lot. And yeah, just Virginia, what she does with this character. Again, this is the luxury of television and not telling it all from Percy's perspective, because in the book, you know, Sally's around at the beginning and then she's around at the end. And we don't get any type of color in between. She is kind of black and white in terms of how that character operates, of like, she loves Percy very much and that's it. Like, but what does that mean? And the show has made great efforts to show what that means. And I love the dichotomy of how Sally and Poseidon in this show specifically approach parenting. Sally is very feverish and frustrated and feeling rushed because when Percy was born, she was given a deadline of like, hey, by the time he's 6, monsters are going to start coming. By the time he's like 12, 13, you're not going to be able to stop them. So every time we get a flashback with her and young Percy, whether it be the swim lessons, whether it be shipping him off to another boarding school, she feels that pressure of like, you need to learn how to swim because, oh my God, they're going to start coming for you soon. And if you don't know how to do this on your own, I can't help you. And I feel so helpless. And your dad can't help because he's got his own stuff. And Poseidon, on the other hand, he has seen fate. He has seen the end of Percy's story. He has seen the middle of Percy's story. He has supreme confidence, and he's also an immortal being. So time essentially means nothing to him. But for us human beings, time is consistently running out. And Sally feels that with Percy, and it leads to frustration, and it leads to other parents staring at her at the pool. It leads to that counselor at the school being like, listen, lady, it's okay. He can get another school, not comprehending the pressure she feels. And I love to bring this all full circle in this episode. At the beginning of the episode, we have her making the reference to the Wizard of Oz, young Percy not understanding that. Then Percy, as 12 years old, bringing up the Wizard of Oz. We're not in Kansas anymore, in the underworld, saying it, and Annabeth not understanding it. And that's when, if you didn't know it now, it should click for you now. Percy, if he was going to be shipped off to boarding school at that time, he was around the same age Annabeth was when she ran away from her mortal dad. And she missed out on a huge chunk of her childhood as a result. And that might even be her regret because, as we know in the books, Luke kind of influenced both, not necessarily Talia, but specifically Annabeth, to get out of her situation and get to camp as soon as possible. Percy was faced with that moment to go down the same path as Annabeth and rush through his childhood when Sally flirted with the idea of sending him to camp at that young age. And instead, they decided to go down the route that Poseidon describes as torture, but in the end, he was better off for it. And that evidence is there because now Percy is of an age where he is leading his fellow demigods to a place that is better than the old ways. Because if Percy was shipped off to Camp Half-Blood at Annabeth's age, would he just be worshiping Poseidon blindly the same way that Annabeth worships Athena blindly? Who's to say? And the reference with the Wizard of Oz, the flashback bringing it home of Poseidon being that guiding force and showing that he cares but not wanting to overstep, because when gods overstep, we saw what happened with Hermes, and you know everything that happens with Luke's mom in the books. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but again, I implore you to read it because it is truly great storytelling. And yeah, there again, like we're talking about the scene. I said this to Nicole yesterday on Riptide Radio. She went on for 7 minutes about her perspective on the scene, which is like double to triple the length of the scene itself. And we are talking about this scene for probably 10, 15 minutes now, double or triple the length of the scene itself. And that is the power of good storytelling. Because like you said, TJ, we all had an ice cream sundae, and now we are like, not to be gross, but like we're digesting it. And like, of course we want to eat more, but like we're better off for it because we're analyzing it, we're sitting with it. And it's like, that's the power of good storytelling and the power of a live action adaptation that is not in Percy's perspective, because one of our favorite scenes in this entire season is something that doesn't exist in the books.
I just want to say too, Liam, first off, that was just like one, that was a really touching sentiment and also just beautiful analysis. It was when you mentioned you first mentioned Sally or like halfway through and you were talking about how we only see her at the beginning and the end. It brought up a point in my head. And then as you kept going, I was like, oh my God, how am I possibly going to follow this up? Because that was a beautiful monologue right there. Well done. But it made me, when you said that we only in the book, we only get Sally in the beginning and the end, it made me think I guess because these are the only scenes in the book that I did not like. And I'm so glad they did not translate these over. When we keep getting these, like they happen to stumble by a TV and they're interviewing Gabe and he's like going through all, I just remember that those are actual scenes in the book. And for the people that don't know, it's like when they get into all these troubles, like on the bus, on the train, and these kinds of things, Percy and the group will walk by a TV, and then they're like, a reporter will be interviewing Gabe, and Gabe will just be talking absolute horrible shit about how bad of a kid Percy was and all this. I knew he was going to be I think the best change that they made, it made me think, is like swapping those scenes with like Sally and Percy flashbacks, because we don't get any of that really in the book. And then it's like now, instead of getting smelly Gabe talking to a TV reporter, we get like really, really touching Percy and Sally flashbacks. And I'm just like, that was like a bullet dodged right there, because for the people that weren't familiar with the source material, if they got those and were like watching, I mean, and I'm blanking on the guy that plays Gabe. He was great in the first episode. Like
Tim Sharp. Yeah.
Exactly. So he's great. And it's like his goal was to kind of make us dislike him. And he did a really, really good job of that. But I am so glad like every 2 episodes we weren't revisiting Gabe to get his take on everything that was going on with Percy, because that would have been so awful in comparison to what we have now.
I totally agree with that. I think I like the way that they didn't, have them walk by a TV and just see Gabe. I like the fact that it was Ares who showed them on his phone that interview that Gabe did for the news or whatever. So, yeah.
And I think that's very well said. They're taking the energy, and instead of proving how shitty Gabe is, they're proving how great Sally Jackson is with that time and with that energy. And I think it's very well done. I was going to save a little game for last, where everybody would pick like, who would your Greek godparent be if you were a demigod? But, and the reason I wanted to do that game was because I specifically had a funny Captain America reference Captain America Winter Soldier reference that I wanted to use on one for Liam. But I'm going to be honest, I got things to do. I got lineups I have to adjust for my fantasy sports job. And we've already been here for over an hour. And so I'm going to assign them to each of you instead of spending the time to play the game. And so first up, Adam, your father was Hephaestus, because you are a worker and a creator, and you are much better looking than Hephaestus, but you are
is a pretty handsome guy.
Yeah, just in general, he's like the way he's told of like Aphrodite never wants him. You know what I mean? Like it's not that it's not that side, but it's the hard worker, it's the creation. Brandon, your father was Apollo. Your father was Apollo because he is the god of light. And that is kind of what I think of when I think of you, an inspiring figure, someone who always is just bringing light and kindness to the world. And so your father was Apollo. Your mother, Liam, your father was a regular dude, but your mother was Aphrodite because specimen. Are you kidding me? He's looking like Infinity War Cap right now. Are you kidding me? And for more Liam, you can check out Riptide Radio, Comic Book Nation podcast, where he'll be doing live shows for the season finale of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Liam, if it's still a surprise, never mind. Just give us a little tease. But if not, who do you got for the finale?
Yeah, well, we have 2 confirmed with TBD on if we'll get another. But we have Adam Copeland to break down the Ares fight, and we have Toby Stevens to break down his scene in the finale. Not going to tell you what it is, but you've seen the trailers. He's in the finale. There's some footage left. So yeah, it's going to be a very fun show, and hopefully we will do a full end of season recap as well. So we will be wrapping up Riptide Radio slowly over the next coming weeks. But again, it's been a great ride. Thank you all for being so supportive and popping in the live chat. And I just want to say before we get out of here, TJ and Adam, like I've given you your flowers in the past, but I just want everyone to know, like Brandon Moore is the model citizen for what it means to be a fan. I've told him this personally. Anytime I find myself in Chicago for work, 5-star steak dinner on me. This dude has supported my work since before I even can remember, like years back. Has been with me like every step of the way, and I cannot put into words how grateful I am for your support. So genuinely, to me, like it is an honor to talk about Percy Jackson, something we have such a mutual love for in this type of analytical format. So yeah, I hope we get to do this again, and thank you, TJ, for organizing this, because TJ was the mastermind. He knows how often Brandon and I interact on socials. He's like playing matchmaker. These two are gonna get like first take level analysis here, and I think we did a pretty good job. So Brandon, thank you again for everything over the years, and I look forward to many more of these with you in the future.
You're welcome, buddy. You're welcome. And I have to echo that with you. I mean, if you're a Percy Jackson fan and you're not following Liam on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, if you're not tuning into Riptide Radio every single Tuesday night, then you need to change that right now, because you would be hard pressed to find anyone who is more passionate about Percy Jackson than he is. And he also happens to be an incredible interviewer, podcast host, a wonderful writer, and just a really good guy all around, and has been for many, many years. So definitely give him a follow for sure.
Very well said. Both of you, couldn't agree more. That was my exact thought process with putting the two of you together. And I didn't even realize you hadn't like face-to-face met yet. So that did make it so much cooler that this is getting to be the first time. And we've just had some great. I know I'm not going to be given the best Percy Jackson analysis. So we're bringing in the best, because Adam can't do it all by himself. I can't leave all the work for him. So of course, check out our last week's episode with Erica Ito and Emma Doris. This week, of course, we got Liam and Brandon, and next week we will have Nicole Drum joining us once again. Adam, do we have anything else I need to cover before I shut us down?
No, Liam, you got to let us know everything that you got going on. I know you talked a little bit about the finale, but man, talk to us a little bit about everything else you got going on, and then where can the people find you on socials? And Brandon gave you that shout out, but you got to let the people know where they can actually find you.
Well, I appreciate you teeing that up. The biggest thing is, like I said, Riptide Radio every Tuesday around like 9:45 Eastern, immediately after new episodes of Percy Jackson air. But look out for a couple more after the season finale. And if you are binging the show now and you want an after show to kind of dissect thoughts, they're all available on replay on Comic Book Nation's YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts as well. As for me personally, I'm at Liam T. Crowley on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, most prominently on Instagram nowadays. And if you like video content, you like interview clips, I try to post at least one a day on my Instagram, and trying to grow my TikTok as well. And again, I'm very active on all socials. So if you want to just say what's up and tell me how much you love Percy Jackson, I love having conversations with everybody. So yeah, thank you guys. Agents of Fandom is a great platform. I've been supporting you guys for years. I got your hat over in the corner. It's one of my favorites to wear when I'm having a bad hair day. Yeah, make sure you guys are supporting Agents of Fandom, because this brand is by the boys for the boys, and it's rare to come across that in the entertainment industry. Yeah, anything I can ever do to support Agents of Fandom, I'm always a call away.
I love all you guys so much. This has been one of the biggest love fests we've had on this show for a while, and I am here for it. Follow Liam on socials. Follow at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter. Agents of Fandom everywhere else. As long as you're finding us on socials, you'll be able to find content from myself, like the interviews with Walker Scoble, Leah Jeffries, and Aryan Samadri. Follow the Agents of Fandom socials, and you'll catch the reviews and recaps that Brandon is doing for Percy Jackson and the Olympians right now. And the name you will see more than anyone else is Adam Blevins, because man, does this dude know how to write. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell on the way out. Make sure you follow wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next week to talk some more Percy Jackson. Peace.